duty of reporting it. Many times I have seen websites exposing information like in the last occasion it was 32 million users exposed full information. And we reported this vulnerability and the only thing we got was a war with a Canadian.
when actually it operates. That's, that's, that's the answer I actually want. Because when I did a lot of reverse engineering to go in a different way. Not the way actually the traditional software does writes the software course. That's good.
I actually have another question for you, and I'm actually curious of the answer, but it might be very good for the audience's edification. So you mentioned two vulnerabilities, in particular cross-site scripting and SQL injection, which in our experience are in fact very common. And it seems like you're sort of educating your customers and demonstrating how their websites, despite what security measures they might have, can actually be exploited. So my question is, how oftentimes for the organizations you work with and you instruct and demonstrate these vulnerabilities to, how often do these companies already have vulnerability scanning and penetration testing they've been doing against the very websites that you exploit in the process?
Brian, you're really asking me a hard question. It's interesting, but most of the companies that I have found I have found vulnerabilities don't really care too much. When you present a vulnerability, you say you make a phone call and you tell them that there's a bug, that there's user information exposed. They eventually just reply you that they don't care. They don't care. If you insist, they will just call you a black hat hacker, and the press focus at you, and it's easier for the companies to make look a hacker responsible for a bug than to accept their own responsibility. A vulnerability exists with or without the hackers. We just find vulnerabilities, we discover them, but the vulnerability is there without or with the hacker. So eventually the companies just take the responsibility away. It's easier for them to say, this guy, hacker company. But the company was vulnerable. Actually, when I found, for example, in the case of, I hope that no one gets offended by this, but in the case of Plenty of Fish, of Marcus Friend, when we reported that there was a flaw exposing 32 million users' information, including many important things, there was people stealing the information since 6 months, or there was hacking activities. Actually, many big websites have vulnerabilities right now that are right now, while we speak, being exploited.
Why, that actually goes very, very, very much to my question, and I'm glad you went down that path. Why is it, do you think, that most of the companies that you work with, why is it they're not able to find these vulnerabilities before you do? Is it because their security framework is not designed properly? Is it because a lack of interest or security is not what they do?
Hard to say. My personal opinion, they make the things too fast. They don't use protocols, but not protocols as a protocol in computing. Protocols as a manner, a way to make the things. It's not really so hard to prevent a MySQL or an SQL injecting attack. It's really simple. I guess that you know how to prevent it. And it's not so hard. It's just one function. In ASP, in PHP, or any other language. One function. It makes a whole difference, but the people just forget it. They add extensions, they are mod modules, they are print this page, send to a friend, and one single mistake in the code turns down the whole structure. One single mistake in 50,000 lines of code. We are humans.
Uh, I'll just, I'll just answer. Currently, the vulnerability test, whenever you ask That depends on either you go for Nmap or you use Nessus. Maximum company, if you find out they're, if you are doing this test, they are basically doing with these two Nessus or Nmap. But if you analyze the Nessus and Nmap code, that itself is not a stable also. So it's not that the companies are not, they are doing some kind of vulnerability test, but which are actually the open source code or clockwork. They are using clockwork to test the static characteristics of code. And also even RTRT they are using to check the dynamic memory conditions also. So this depends on how actually they are approaching and all this. You have a very nice question.
Actually, if I would understand and if I would answer you, Chris, the point I want to make is while the vulnerability is identified, most of the firms, like he said, likes to not hear it. They like to put it that the hacker has hacked and hence it's found. But it has evolved. I mean, especially I've seen it in Europe and now I'm seeing it in India. What they do is they started realizing the potential. When they realize that it is actually affecting their sales, it is actually affecting their numbers at the end of the day. And when you actually, I mean, there was an instance that happened in Winter Olympics when we came to know that particular technology firm has compromised some of its sports, and when we realized that the gentleman who's handling that, his entire profile is available on the net through that, that's when he got triggered. So usually when you go to him and say that, hey, we found a vulnerability, he would not excise you, he would not address you. He would say, you know what, thank you so much, you're a hacker, so hence you know it. But if you actually expose what the criticality about it in terms of how much is going to affect your business, number one, or in terms of releasing his own profile. Okay, dude, you think you're in safe hands, but you're not. That's when they act on it. And that was my European experience. But after coming to India, what I realized is most of the governments per se today, there is a set procedures. You know, there's certain standards they expect you to do before you put any hardware into the state data centers. They would expect you to do certain security audits. They expect you to do certain VAs and penetration testing and so on. So all these reports. So somewhere that education is going on. The hacking versus an unethical hacker versus a hacker versus, you know, the good guy and the bad guy. Somewhere I think it's easy to say that you're hacking, you're a hacker, you have those application level experience, you had a lot of understanding of how the application is written and hence you can hack it, but not everyone else can do it. It's easy to say that answer and get away. But what happens is when you realize that your own information is actually compromised, that's when you get triggered. When you realize that your own business sales are dropping down because of this particular activity that happened, that's when you realize, oh, let me address it, right? So those are the two things. But mainly, like I said, while there are certain procedures, hackers, as he said, are always ahead of the game. So my question, my question to in fact both of you is, I mean, good to see the hacking side of it and good to see the investigation part of it in the earlier phase. Now, my question that I have for both of you is, I see that the knowledge sharing is not happening. I mean, a lot of people doesn't understand the very definition of cybersecurity, as Jackie has mentioned in the morning. So each one of us who use internet, we don't understand how we're compromising our details on the net when we know that, you know, giving information to Facebook is secure, giving information to ICICI Bank is secure, right? Giving my information to Bank of America is secure. But how secure it is, what is it meant from, my question from the investigation perspective, while you investigate and you say that, you know, the sector-wise you've shown in the morning that hospitality is the sector where the information is getting leaked. And he has proven different points. One way or the other, I can put whatever his findings into that sector itself. So somewhere, is it due to not the security policy the firm has, or is it due to the very understanding of security is missing? So in which case, you guys, one as a hacker and one as an investigator,
Brian,
what is it that you wanted to
may I
tell?
invite you to come to the scenario?
Absolutely. He was asking you to come there. Because my question is for both of you.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So the question basically what I have is the investigator is investigating and finding out that these are the loopholes. The hacker is saying that, thank you so much, I'm ahead of you. I found these are the These are the things that you need to be vigilant about. Essentially, what I get from both of you, one is investigator, the other one is a hacker, is a couple of things are missing. Is it the education about the cyber knowledge is missing in the users? In which case, what is it as we as a cyber society, so-called cyber society, need to address? Number one. And number two, is it the security policy that's getting compromised? In which case, does somebody need to look into the security policy and say, you know what, make it tight?
I'd love to. I think you mentioned understanding. I think there is honestly one silver bullet answer to that. And we see this, man, as an investigator in every case, you get to know the victim company and the points of contact. And honestly, you work with them, you sit with them. Sometimes you're there for 36 hours and you get to know them personally. And it's uncomfortable, case after case, year after year, standing there next to people who truly believe the likelihood that they were hacked is like 1 in a billion. And then you're always there. It's a fait accompli that it happens when you're there when the light bulb goes off on their head and they realize, oh my God, it did happen to us. And for all those people, the one thing that they all have in common is that they believe security is about networks and cables and boxes and everything inside the conventional perimeter. And that one hard lesson they pick up at some point, that realization weeks after the crime is, oh, wait a minute, security isn't about commodity items, it's about the data, and I'm responsible for the data, whether it's within my enterprise or beyond it, which it increasingly is these days.
I I agree with you, Brian. Certainly, there is the people, the companies don't pay much information to any potential security issue. It's like, I believe personally, in my experience, the companies just don't care about security until something happens to them. And once it happens, they try to go back in time, but it's too late to go back in time. There's no chance to go back in time. So I believe that the companies need to take more measures to do something about security. You cannot, it's like, I don't know, in my country, if you, or I believe that in any country actually, if you go to the street with a lot of gold chains, to a neighborhood where the people doesn't have food, you're gonna get in troubles. I mean, security is just like that. The internet have hackers. You cannot change that. Even if I wouldn't report vulnerabilities, even if people like me wouldn't do it, someone is gonna be there stealing information. One mistake in the architecture, and it's all gone. It's all gone.
No,
The
actually, my
user
question
cannot
is
do
not
anything
that.
about it.
Actually, my